Welcome back to Whispers in the Dark. Tonight's story is about a lighthouse that should not exist anymore. A lighthouse that was decommissioned, stripped, sealed, and left to rot on a knife edge of stone where the sea has all the patience in the world. It is a story about a light that was not meant for ships. It is a story about fog that does not behave like fog. It is a story about the kind of loneliness that grows teeth. Get comfortable. Put your headphones on. And if you live near the water, if you have ever seen a beam of light sweep across the horizon and felt, for no reason you could name, that the light was looking for you, then listen carefully, because there are places where the ocean does not simply drown you. It keeps you. And before we begin, if you enjoy slow, burning horror, detailed atmosphere, and stories that sink their hands into you and do not let go, make sure you are subscribed. Leave a like if you want more of these long narrations, and tell me in the comments what setting you want next. This is the story of Warden's Reach Lighthouse. It begins with a letter that smelled faintly of salt and old paper. Elias Mercer had been awake for 2 nights straight when it arrived. His flat in Harrogate was 1 room over a butcher's shop, and the stink of raw meat seeped through the floorboards in summer. The window stuck in its frame, and the city air tasted like wet coins. He sat at his desk under a bare bulb that buzzed like an insect trapped in glass, staring at photographs laid in careful rows, and listening to the rain press its fingers against the pane. Elias was the kind of man who kept his life arranged in rectangles, files aligned, photos squared, notes clipped. He was 29 and already looked older, not because of age, but because of the way his eyes never quite stopped measuring. He did not smile often, not because he could not, but because he had learned that smiling made people think they could lean on you. He worked for a small publication that paid him to chase strange stories and squeeze them into tidy columns. Disappearances, abandoned places, local myths that fattened like eels in rumor. He had a knack for it. He could make a reader feel the damp of a cellar, the sting of cold iron. He could walk into a town and listen for an hour and leave with the real story tucked behind everyone's practiced lies. The photographs on his desk were of the same place from different angles. A lighthouse on a thin black reef. A white tower stained with weather and bird waste. A lantern room with panes that caught the weak sun like dull teeth. Around it, an ocean that looked too heavy, too thick, as if water could be bored into something like oil. In the newest photo, taken from a cliff on the mainland, the lighthouse beam was on. A pale bar of light reaching across fog. That was impossible. Warden's Reach had been decommissioned 15 years ago after an accident. No generator, no keeper, no supply line. The island it stood on was barely an island at all, just a jag of rock revealed at low tide and swallowed at high. And yet the light was on. Elias turned the letter over once, twice, as if he could find a hidden seam. The envelope had no return address. The stamp was the plain kind you could buy in any any corner shop. The handwriting on the front was tidy, but uneven, like someone writing while cold. Inside was a single sheet, folded once. Elias Mercer, it began. You do not know me. My name does not matter now. There is a light where no light should be. If you want a story, go to Warden's Reach. Bring your recorder. Bring extra batteries. Bring a knife if you still believe in knives. Do not look directly into the lantern room if you see it lit. Do not answer if you hear your name from the water. If you go, you will not come back as you were, but you will come back enough to write it down. I need someone to write it down. Then beneath the warning, a set of coordinates and a date. 2 days from now. Elias read it twice, and then a third time, the way you test a tooth with your tongue, even after you know it is loose. His pulse did not quicken. He did not feel the thrill of adventure. What he felt was the familiar tug of obligation to the unknown, the same pull that had led him into abandoned bunkers and into the homes of grieving families who wanted their sorrow turned into ink. He told himself he would go because it was work, because his editor would like it, because a lighthouse with an unexplained light was exactly the kind of thing readers clicked on. He did not tell himself the truth, which was that the photograph on his desk made something old and quiet inside him sit up and listen. Because when Elias was a boy, his father used to take him to the coast in winter when the promenade was empty and the wind peeled at your skin. They would stand on the cliffs and watch the distant lighthouse beams sweep across the horizon, slow and steady, and his father would say, "That's how you know you are not alone out here. That light means someone is awake. Someone is watching. Someone is keeping you from the rocks." His father had been dead for years, died in a house fire that started in the night with no clear cause. Elias had stood outside with ash on his face and watched the roof collapse. He had heard wood crack like bone. Afterward, when the investigators told him there was nothing to be done, he had gone home and stared into a mirror until he could not recognize the boy looking back. A light meant someone was awake, and if the light was awake where no one should be, then what exactly was watching? 2 days later, Elias sat in the back of a small ferry that smelled of diesel and fish scales. The sky was the color of bruised milk. The sea around the harbor was restless, spitting white at the pilings. He had brought a backpack with a recorder, a camera, spare batteries, a flashlight, food, water, a folded raincoat, and a small folding knife he had bought that morning, mostly because the letter told him to. The ferry's benches were slick with old varnish. The other passengers were locals with weathered faces, carrying crates, ropes, sacks of something that shifted. No one looked at Elias for long. He had the soft hands of someone who wrote for a living. They could smell it on him. The boat took him to a village called Lark's Hollow, a scatter of stone cottages, and a pub pressed against the cliff road. There was a small harbor with a single working crane and a row of fishing boats that looked like they had been stitched together from old storms. Gulls screamed above, their voices sharp and mocking. Elias stepped off the ferry and felt the wind hit him like an open palm. The air tasted of kelp and metal. He adjusted the strap of his backpack and walked up the lane toward the pub, because he had learned that if you wanted the truth in a coastal town, you started where people drank. The pub was called the Sundered Lantern. Its sign, swinging on iron chains, showed a lighthouse split down the middle by a crack of lightning. Inside, the light was dim and amber. The walls were lined with framed photographs of boats and men holding fish too large to look real. A wood stove hissed and clicked. The smell of old beer and wet wool filled Elias' nose. Behind the bar stood a woman in her 50s, with hair the color of ash and eyes like pale glass. She watched him come in with a stillness that made him feel as if he had entered a room where a conversation had just stopped. He ordered tea because it was early and he wanted his head clear. The woman poured it without asking what kind, as if there was only one kind of tea in Lark's Hollow, the kind that kept your hands warm enough to feel your fingers. Elias took a seat near the window and turned on his recorder, placing it on the table between his hands. He did not hide it. He rarely needed to. People always assumed the worst was already known. "I'm here about Warden's Reach," he said, loud enough for the bar to hear. A few heads shifted, not turned, not fully, just angled like animals hearing a distant snap. The woman behind the bar did not move at first. Then she set her hands flat on the wood, leaning forward slightly. "You're not," she said. "I am," Elias replied. "Someone sent me a letter." At that, a man at the far end of the bar laughed once, short and humorless. He had a beard with more gray than brown and hands thick with scars. He did not look at Elias as he spoke. "Letters have been going out again," he muttered, "like gulls bringing back bones." The woman poured herself a small drink, not tea, something darker. She brought it to her lips without sipping, as if the smell alone was enough. "You want a story," she said. It was not a question. "I do," Elias answered, "and I want to know why the light is on." The woman's eyes flicked to the window, to the sea beyond the village, where the horizon was hidden behind a slab of fog that looked too solid to be fog. "That light should be dead," she said. "We made sure of it." "You made sure," Elias repeated. He leaned forward. "What happened out there?" The man with the beard spoke again. "They tell it wrong, usually. They tell it like a ghost story. But it wasn't a ghost story. It was a job, a normal job. Men went out, men came back. The light went around and around. Then it didn't." Elias waited. Silence stretched. The stove hissed. A glass clinked somewhere. Finally, the woman behind the bar said, "The last keeper was named Tomlin Warden. His family had kept that lighthouse for 3 generations, and they talked about it like it was a blood oath. His father before him, his father before him. Warden's Reach. The name came from them." And then Elias said quietly, And then the fog came, she replied. Elias frowned. Fog. You'll see fog like you've never seen, the bearded man said. He had turned slightly now, enough that Elias could see his eyes. They were red-rimmed, as if he had not slept in a long time, or had cried himself empty, and then kept going. Fog that moves wrong. Fog that stands still when wind should shred it. Fog that brings sound. What sound? Elias asked. The woman's mouth tightened. Voices. From where? From the water, she said, and it came out flat, like an old truth that had been scraped clean of drama. Calling from the surf. Calling from under the stone. Calling with your own voice. Elias had heard enough stories to recognize the shape of a myth. The sea calls. The lighthouse keeper goes mad. The light becomes haunted. He could already see the article headline forming, clean and clickable. But there was something in the way they avoided his eyes. Something in the way their bodies held themselves, like they were braced for an impact that could come at any time. That made the air in the pub feel heavier. Did anyone die? Elias asked. The bearded man barked a laugh again. Did anyone live? The woman finally sipped her drink, and Elias noticed her hand shaking just slightly. Tomlin Warden sent a distress signal, she said. Not on the proper channel. He used the old foghorn line, 3 short bursts, then one long, over and over, the kind of thing you hear in your bones. The Coast Guard went out, but the water was too rough, and the fog was thick enough to swallow the boat's bow. They turned back. They told him to wait for morning. Her gaze fixed on Elias now, sharp as a hook. He did not wait. What did he do? Elias asked. He lit the fog, she said. He turned the beam inward. Elias blinked. Inward. The beam is meant to sweep the sea, to warn ships away, she continued. But that night, he locked it, aimed it down at the rock, into the fog bank. He kept it there, like he was trying to burn through something. The bearded man's fingers curled around his glass. And then the sound started. Not the foghorn, not waves, the screaming, like 100 throats. Elias' skin prickled. He forced himself to keep his voice steady. Did anyone go to help? We tried, the woman said. In the morning, when the fog lifted, a boat went out. My husband was on it, 2 others. They reached the rock. They found the door open. They found the stairs wet. They found the walls marked up, claw marks, blood, a smell like old fish left in a tin. Her eyes grew distant. They went up. They found the lantern room empty. The glass was smeared on the inside, like hands had pressed against it from within, not from the room, from the light. Elias tried to picture it and failed. What do you mean? I mean the glass had prints like something had been outside the tower, up in the air, pressing its hands to the windows and looking in. The bearded man swallowed. They found Tomlin Warden at the base of the lantern pedestal. His skin was white as candle wax. His mouth was open, so wide it had torn, and his eyes were gone. Elias' throat tightened. He pressed his fingers against his cup. The tea had gone cold. Gone, he repeated. Not gouged out, the woman said. Not pecked, not eaten, just not there. Like someone had reached in and taken the light behind them. Elias turned his recorder off for a moment and stared at the table, because the room felt suddenly too close, too thick with other people's breath. When he looked up again, he asked, "So you decommissioned the lighthouse?" "We did more than that," the woman said. "We sealed it. We stripped the fuel. We cut the power lines. We welded the door. We poured concrete into the lower windows. We bolted a steel plate over the hatch. We told the sea it could have the tower, but it could not have our minds. And yet the light is on," Elias said. The bearded man's gaze slid to the window again. Because it was never the generator. Silence settled like dust. Elias could have left. That was the sensible thing. He could have written a piece about local superstition and an old lighthouse that flickered sometimes due to misinterpreted reflections. He could have turned the story into something safe. Instead, he asked, "Can someone take me out there?" No one answered. The woman leaned in close across the bar, her voice low. "No." "I'll pay," Elias said. The bearded man's mouth twisted. "Money doesn't buy you back." "I just need a boat," Elias insisted. "To the rock and back." The woman set her drink down and stared at him for a long time, as if weighing what kind of man he was. Then she said, "There's one who might. Not for money, for pride, for spite. He's lost enough already that he thinks the sea owes him. His name is Callum Shaw. He'll be down at the harbor at low tide. If he says yes, you go. If he says no, you leave." Elias nodded. He did not thank her. Gratitude felt inappropriate. He walked out of the sundered lantern and into the wind. The fog on the horizon looked closer now, like a slow beast dragging itself toward shore. He felt, irrationally, that it had noticed him, that the mention of the lighthouse had lifted something's head. At the harbor, low tide exposed slick rocks and black seaweed that glistened like skin. Fishing boats rocked against ropes, creaking. A man stood by a small motorboat, checking fuel and muttering to himself. He was tall and narrow-shouldered, wearing a heavy coat with a collar stained by salt. His hair was dark and wet, as if he had already been out in rain. His face was sharp, with a nose that looked like it had been broken and healed wrong. Elias approached. "Callum Shaw." The man looked up. His eyes were pale, almost colorless, and for a moment Elias felt as if he were looking through glass at something behind it. "You're not from here," Callum said. "No," Elias replied. "You've got city shoes," Callum said, and his mouth lifted in something that was not a smile. "And you've got the look of someone who thinks stories are things you can carry in your pocket." Elias did not deny it. "I need to go to Warden's Reach." Callum's gaze hardened. "No." Elias inhaled. "I'm not asking you to go into the tower, just to take me close. I can climb on my own. I can be quick." Callum's eyes flicked to Elias' backpack. "Quick is what kills you out there. The sea likes quick men." swallows them clean. Elias took the letter from his coat and held it out. Callum did not take it, but he looked at it, and something in his face shifted, subtle as tide turning. "Those letters again," Callum murmured. "You've seen them," Elias said. Callum's jaw tightened. "I. Who sends them?" Callum stared past Elias, out at the water. "The lighthouse sends them," he said quietly, as if nomming it too loudly would wake it fully. Then he shook his head, sharp, like he could shake the thought loose. "No, that's rubbish. It's people. It's always people doing cruel things to one another. But the timing is wrong, and the paper is always dry, even when it should be wet. And the ink smells like salt." Elias' stomach twisted. "Will you take me?" Callum looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "I'll take you to the reef at slack water. You get on, you do what you think you need, and you get back before the tide turns. If the fog comes in, we leave anyway. If you're still on the rock, you stay with it." Elias nodded once. "When?" Callum glanced at the sky. "Now, before the wind shifts." They pushed off in the motorboat, the harbor falling away behind them. The village shrank into gray stone and smoke. The sea rose and fell in thick rolls, dark and heavy. Spray hit Elias' face, cold enough to sting. He pulled his coat tighter, tucked his recorder into an inner pocket. Callum drove without speaking. His hands on the controls were steady, practiced. The boat bounced, slapped the water, shuddered. Elias watched the horizon. At first, there was only fog, a long pale wall stretching across the sea. Then, like a bone surfacing, the lighthouse appeared. A white tower on a black tooth of rock. Even from a distance, it looked wrong, not because it was eerie in the usual way, but because it felt misplaced, like an old scar on the sea that should have healed. And the light was on, not sweeping, not rotating in a calm rhythm. It held steady for several seconds, pointed into the fog. Then it moved slowly, as if searching. Elias felt the hair rise on his arms. The beam was pale, almost colorless, but it cut the fog in a straight line, making the air look sliced open. Callum muttered a curse under his breath. "You see it," Elias said. "Aye," Callum replied, voice tight. "I see it." As they drew closer, Elias noticed something else. The fog was not drifting like normal fog. It seemed to cling to the sea in thick sheets, rising and falling in gentle pulses, like something breathing. Every now and then, the fog bulged outward, as if something moved beneath it, then settled again. Elias told himself it was an illusion, a trick of light and weather, but his body did not believe him. The reef rose from the water, slick black stone, with white foam licking its edges. Waves crashed and retreated, leaving strings of seaweed like hair plastered to rock. Callum brought the boat around to the leeward side, where the water was calmer, and cut the engine. The sudden quiet was enormous. The sea still roared, but the boat's vibration stopped, and Elias could hear his own breath. "You've got 10 minutes, Callum said, maybe less." Elias climbed carefully onto the rock, his boots slipping on wet stone. He grabbed a jagged edge and pulled himself up. The rock smelled of salt and decay. Barnacles scraped his palms through his gloves. He stood, found balance, and looked up at the lighthouse. Up close, the tower was stained with rust streaks and bird droppings. The paint had peeled in large flakes, revealing darker layers beneath. The door at the base was indeed welded shut, but the welds looked cracked, as if forced. There were marks on the metal, deep grooves, like something had tried to pry it open from the inside. The wind carried a low sound, so faint Elias thought it might be the sea. A moan, long and thin, like a throat humming. He walked around the base and found a narrow maintenance hatch that should have been sealed. It hung ajar, swinging slightly. The inside was darkness, a thick black that did not reflect light. Elias' mouth went dry. He turned on his flashlight and aimed it in. The beam fell onto damp stone steps spiraling upward. Water dripped somewhere above, steady as a heartbeat. The smell that came out was not simply mold or rot. It was fishy, sharp, with something sweet underneath, like meat left too long. Callum called from the boat, "Elias, don't." Elias did not answer. His feet moved as if pulled. He stepped into the hatch, the stone cold beneath his boots, and began to climb. The air inside the lighthouse was warmer than outside, thick and stale. The walls were rough stone, damp to the touch. The spiral staircase narrowed as it rose. Elias' flashlight beam caught on scratches in the stone, long and irregular, some deep enough to cast shadows. He reached out and ran his fingers along one. The groove was smooth at the bottom, polished by repeated contact. He climbed higher. The sound he had heard outside grew clearer. Not a moan, a whisper layered, as if many mouths spoke at once far away. He could not make out words yet, but the cadence was wrong, not like human speech, more like tide dragging pebbles. His recorder in his pocket began to pick up static. He pulled it out, pressed record, and held it in his hand. The little red light glowed. The screen flickered, then steadied. He climbed past a landing where a door hung off its hinges. Inside was a small room that might have been the keeper's quarters. A rusted cot, a table, a shelf with broken glass, and on the wall, writing. Not neat writing, scratched into stone with something sharp. The letters jagged and uneven. Do not look into it. Beneath the light is a mouth. It learns you. Elias stared, feeling his throat tighten. He lifted his flashlight. There were more marks, overlapping. Whole sections of wall covered in scratches that might once have been words, now unreadable. He backed out of the room and continued upward, faster now, because staying still felt worse. The whispering grew louder, and beneath it, another sound emerged, faint at first. A wet tapping, rhythmic. Elias paused, holding his breath. Tap, tap, tap. It sounded like fingers against glass. His flashlight beam shook slightly as he climbed again. The staircase curved, and the air grew brighter, as if light seeped down from above. Elias realized he was nearing the lantern room. The tapping became a scratch, a drag like nails, then clear as someone leaning close to his ear. He heard a voice say his name. Elias. He froze. The voice was not Callum's. It was not any voice from the pub. It sounded like his father. Elias' stomach dropped so hard he felt nauseated. He closed his eyes, forcing air into his lungs. "It's a trick," he whispered to himself. "It's the wind. It's the sea." "Elias," the voice said again, softer, almost tender. "Come up. You're cold. Come up and look." His eyes opened. His flashlight beam showed the final stretch of stairs, leading to a trapdoor. Light poured through the cracks around it, pale and steady. The letter had said, "Do not look directly into the lantern room if you see it lit." Elias swallowed. He took one more step, then another, until he stood beneath the trapdoor. The whispering was loud now, like a crowd murmuring behind a wall. The tapping and scratching came from above him, circling. He could go back down. He could leave. He could climb out and return to the boat, write his article from the safety of distance. He reached up and pushed the trapdoor open. The lantern room was not empty. At first, he saw the familiar shapes. The circular space, the metal pedestal where the lamp assembly sat, the ring of glass panes around the room, fog pressed against them outside like a face against skin. The beam of light, impossibly bright for a dead lighthouse, shone from the center, but it did not come from a bulb. It came from a shape. Elias' breath caught. His flashlight fell from his hand and clattered on metal. In the center of the lantern room, where a lamp should have been, there was something like a column of pale flesh, tall and wet. It was not solid. It seemed to ripple, as if made of layered membrane. Within it, light pulsed, brightening and dimming like a living organ. At the top, where the lens should have been, the flesh opened into a ring of petal-like folds. A mouth, not a human mouth. A circular opening lined with translucent teeth that looked like glass. And behind them, a depth Elias could not measure. A darkness that seemed to curve inward forever. The beam of light poured from the mouth, sweeping the fog outside, searching. And around the ring of glass windows, pressed from the outside, were hands. Dozens of them. Pale, waterlogged hands, fingers splayed, nails torn. They were flattened against the panes, leaving smeared streaks of wetness. Some hands were small like a child, some large and swollen. They moved slowly, sliding, tapping, scratching. Elias' mind tried to reject what he saw, but his eyes kept taking it in, piece by piece, like a camera that would not stop recording. The whispering was not coming from the walls. It was coming from the mouth. Voices layered, overlapping, speaking in 1,000 tones. Some familiar, some not, all woven together into a sound that made Elias' teeth ache. And then, From within the mouth's pulsing light, a face surfaced, not fully, not like flesh, more like an image pressed behind glass. A man's face, pale and stretched, eyes empty sockets, mouth open, Tomlin Warden. His lips moved. Elias heard the words inside his skull, not in his ears. "Look into the light," it said. "Let it see you." Elias stumbled backward, hitting the railing. His heart hammered. His throat burned with the urge to scream. He forced himself to look away from the mouth, remembering the warning. But even when he turned his head, the light still filled the room, still seeped into his peripheral vision. It was not like normal light. It felt like something probing, like fingers inside his thoughts. He grabbed his recorder, still running, and backed toward the trapdoor. Then the voice of his father came again, not from below, not from the sea, but from the mouth itself. "Elias," it said, and there was disappointment in it. "Why did you leave me in the fire?" Elias' knees nearly buckled. The light brightened, and in that brightness, he saw shapes moving in the fog outside, tall silhouettes drifting close to the windows. The hands pressed harder. The glass panes creaked. Elias realized, with sudden certainty, that the hands were not trying to get in. They were trying to get out. He dropped through the trapdoor, slamming it shut above him. He fumbled in the dark stairwell, hands shaking so badly he could barely grip the metal rung. Above him, the tapping became a pounding. The trapdoor shook, dust raining down. The whispering poured through cracks, louder now, excited, like a crowd smelling blood. Elias ran down the spiral stairs, nearly falling, boots slipping on damp stone. His flashlight was gone. He used his phone screen for light, but it flickered, the battery draining rapidly though it had been full. He passed the room with the scratched warning, and now the writing seemed fresher, wet, as if the stone itself bled ink. Another line had appeared beneath the others. "It has your face now." He did not stop. At the base of the lighthouse, the hatch that had been ajar slammed shut on its own as he approached, metal clanging. Elias lunged, wedging his fingers into the gap, pulling. The hatch resisted like a jaw. He shoved, grunting, and managed to force it open enough to squeeze through. Outside, the wind hit him like a slap. The sea's roar felt suddenly distant, as if muffled by cotton. Callum was shouting from the boat, his voice raw. "Elias, get back now." Elias scrambled across the slick rock. His boots slid. He fell once, catching himself on barnacles that cut his palm. Blood mixed with seawater. He tasted iron in the air. Behind him, from the lighthouse, came a sound like a deep inhale. The fog around the tower thickened, rolling outward, crawling over the rock like a living thing. And from within that fog, something moved. A shape emerged, tall and thin, its outline wavering. It stood near the lighthouse base, head tilted, as if listening. Elias could not see details, only the impression of limbs too long, joints bending wrong, and a surface that reflected the lighthouse beam in wet flashes. The shape raised an arm. The fog around it shifted, and Elias heard his name again. But this time, it was not his father. It was Elias' own voice. Elias, it called, and the sound was perfect. His exact tone, his exact cadence, like a recording played back. Elias' skin crawled. He forced himself not to answer, remembering the letter. Callum threw a rope. Grab it. Elias grabbed the rope, hands slick with blood. Callum hauled, muscles straining, and Elias felt himself pulled toward the boat's side. A wave surged, lifting the boat, almost smashing Elias against it. He grunted, pain flaring in his ribs. Callum swore, grabbed Elias' collar, and yanked. Elias tumbled into the boat, landing hard on the wet floor. He lay there gasping, salt water in his mouth. Callum started the engine immediately. The boat lurched, pulling away from the rock. Elias turned his head toward the lighthouse. The beam swept, faster now, frantic. It caught the boat and held. The light was so pale it almost looked like moonshine, but it felt heavy, pressing down. Elias' vision blurred. In the light, the fog looked full of faces. Callum shouted something, but Elias could not hear it properly. The light filled his ears with a high whine. The boat sped across choppy water, but the fog did not stay behind. It followed, rolling over the sea in a wide front, keeping pace, as if it knew exactly where they were going. Elias sat up, clenching his jaw. It followed us, he managed. Callum's knuckles were white on the wheel. It always does, he said. That's why we don't go. Elias looked down at his recorder. The screen showed it was still recording, but the audio levels spiked wildly, as if picking up a storm of sound. He held it closer to his ear. He heard whispers, not just whispers, words. Under the static, dozens of voices spoke in unison, slow and rhythmic, like a chant. Let us see you. Let it name you. Let it keep you. Elias' stomach turned. He shut the recorder off, but the whispers did not stop. They continued in his head, faint, like a memory of sound. The fog thickened. Visibility dropped. The shore disappeared. The sea became a gray void, the boat a small moving speck inside it. Callum's voice was strained. We're too far in. We can still turn back, Elias said, though he did not believe it. Callum shook his head sharply. No, the current's wrong. It pulls. Elias looked over the side and saw the water swirling in slow circles, like drains. The boat's path curved, not straight. The engine roared, but they were being guided, shepherded. The fog around them suddenly brightened. Elias turned and saw, behind them, a pale glow blooming through the fog. The lighthouse beam, impossibly far, yet close, as if distance meant nothing to it. And then ahead, another light appeared, a faint lantern glow, warm and golden, the kind you would see from a harbor. It hung in the fog like a promise. Callum's breathing hitched. No, he whispered. Elias leaned forward. That's the village. It's not, Callum said. His voice trembled. The village lights don't sit out here. The golden glow grew larger as they approached, and shapes emerged beneath it. A pier, wooden posts, a small harbor. Elias' heart pounded. It looked like Lark's Hollow, but wrong. Too clean, too still. The water here was flat as oil. The fog pressed close, but did not drift. The harbor lanterns burned without flicker. Callum tried to turn away, but the boat's bow angled toward the pier, as if pulled by a rope. The boat bumped gently against wood. Elias could have stepped off without even getting his boots wet. The harbor was silent. No gulls, no wind, no creak of rope. The lanterns glowed steadily, casting warm pools of light on empty planks. Elias stood, legs shaking. Where are we? Callum did not move. He stared at the pier as if at a grave. This is what it shows you, he said. It shows you safe places. It shows you home. Then it takes you. Elias swallowed hard. We should leave. Start the engine. Callum tried. He turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then died. He tried again. Nothing. No sound at all, as if the boat had become a dead thing. Elias looked at his phone. The screen was black. It would not turn on. The fog around them seemed to tighten. A footstep sounded on the pier. Elias jerked his head up. A man stood in the lantern light at the far end of the pier. He wore a fisherman's coat and a cap pulled low. His posture was familiar. Callum's breath caught. No, he whispered again, voice breaking. The man lifted his head. It was Callum, or it looked like him. Same sharp face, same pale eyes, same broken nose. But his skin was too smooth, as if stretched over bone without pores. And his smile was too wide. Come on, the man said in Callum's voice. You made it back. Callum shook, hands gripping the boat's sides. You're not me. The thing on the pier laughed softly. I'm the part you left out there, it said. I'm the part that listened when you wouldn't. Elias' throat went dry. He realized, with a sinking certainty, that Callum had been to the lighthouse before, that he had escaped, but not whole. The thing took a step closer. Its boots made no sound on the wood. Step off, it said gently. It's warm here. It's quiet. You can stop running. Elias looked behind them. Fog, endless. Ahead, the false harbor, the false village. The lantern light was warm and inviting, like a childhood memory. Elias' mind, traitorous, offered him an image of his father standing at the pub door, smiling, alive. He clenched his fists until his cut palms stung. No, Elias said aloud, voice hoarse. The thing's smile faltered slightly. Its eyes shifted to Elias, and for a moment, Elias saw something else behind them. A pale glow, the lighthouse light. It saw you, the thing whispered. It knows your name. It knows your face. Callum suddenly stood, grabbing a flare gun from under the boat seat. Elias had not seen it before. Callum's hands shook as he aimed at the pier. "If this is a dream," Callum snarled, "then I'll burn it." He fired. The flare arced, bright red, and struck the pier planks near the thing's feet. It flared, hissing, spitting sparks. The thing did not flinch. The red light reflected in its eyes, and Elias saw the truth. Its eyes were not eyes. They were glassy lenses, like the lighthouse lens, rotating slowly. The flare burned, but the pier did not catch fire. The wood looked wet, slick, like flesh. The thing stepped forward, and the flare's light dimmed as if swallowed. "You can't burn fog," it said softly. "You can't burn the sea." Callum backed up, stumbling. His face was wet. Elias realized he was crying, silent tears running down his cheeks. The thing raised its hand and beckoned, a gesture almost tender. From the water beneath the pier, hands emerged. Pale hands, dozens, reaching up, gripping the wood. Fingers curled over the edge like barnacles. Elias backed away from the boat's side, heart hammering. "We have to move," he said to Callum. "We have to do something." Callum's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The hands under the pier began to climb. Bodies followed, not whole bodies, not human bodies. Shapes of people made wrong, waterlogged skins stretched, limbs too thin, faces blurred like wax left near heat. They climbed silently, pulling themselves up, filling the pier. And among them, Elias saw a face he recognized from the photographs in the pub. The woman behind the bar. Her eyes were empty hollows, her mouth open in a silent scream, and her skin was pale as foam. She reached out, fingers trembling, and whispered Elias' name in a voice like bubbles. Elias stumbled back, nearly falling. Callum suddenly grabbed Elias' shoulder hard enough to bruise. "Don't look," he hissed. "Don't let it show you what you want." Elias' breath came in ragged gasps. "What do we do?" Callum's eyes darted around wild. Then he looked down at the boat floor, at the fuel can, at the oily rag. A grim clarity settled over his face. He shoved Elias toward the bow. "Get ready to jump," he said. Elias stared. "Jump where it's water." Callum's jaw clenched. Better water than the light. The thing on the pier stepped closer to the boat now, its feet still silent. The hands and shapes behind it filled the pier, pressing forward, crowding, a mass of pale limbs and blank faces. The fog brightened again. The lighthouse light. It was here now, not behind them, but above, pouring down from the fog like a column. Elias looked up and saw the beam cutting through gray, and within it, the faint outline of the mouth, hanging in the air like a wound. The whispering surged, louder than ever, inside Elias' skull. "Let it see you. Let it name you. Let it keep you." Elias' vision wavered. He felt his thoughts sliding, as if the light was rearranging them, pulling memories out and holding them up like objects. He saw his father in the fire again, reaching out. He heard his own voice, small and terrified, calling for help. He felt the guilt, hot and endless, that he had carried for years without numbing. The light pressed down, and the guilt rose like bile. Callum moved quickly, grabbing the oily rag, shoving it into the fuel can opening, then striking a match. The flame flared, small and orange, defiant in the pale light. The thing on the pier tilted its head, watching, curious. Callum whispered, almost to himself, "If it wants light, I'll give it light." He dropped the match. The fuel ignited with a whoosh, a sudden roar of flame that bloomed across the boat. Heat slammed into Elias' face. Smoke rose thick and black. Elias shouted, stumbling back. The fire spread fast, licking up the boat's sides, hungry. Callum grabbed Elias by the collar and shoved him toward the water. "Now," he yelled. Elias did not have time to think. He leapt. Cold water swallowed him. It was shockingly cold, a knife through his chest. He gasped, swallowing salt, flailing. Above, the boat burned, flames roaring. The false harbor lanterns still glowed calmly, untouched. The pier crowd watched in silence. Elias kicked, trying to swim away, but the water was thick. It felt like moving through syrup. His limbs grew heavy. Something brushed his ankle. Hands. He kicked harder, panic rising, but the hands closed, fingers like cold hooks, pulling. Elias' mouth opened to scream, but water rushed in. Salt burned his throat. He thrashed, eyes wide, and in the water around him, he saw shapes, pale and drifting, faces turned upward, mouths open. They were not swimming. They were suspended, like bodies in deep water. A face drifted close to his father. Not exactly. The shape had his father's eyes, his father's brow, but the skin was waterlogged, the lips pale, the expression slack. The eyes were not eyes, but dull glass. The mouth moved, and bubbles rose. "Elias," it said, voice muffled, tender. "Look at me." Elias shook his head violently, eyes squeezed shut. He tried to pull his leg free, but the hands tightened. He felt himself being dragged downward. Darkness swallowed him. The water grew colder, crushing. His ears filled with pressure. The whispering in his head faded, replaced by a deep, slow sound, like a heartbeat, like the ocean itself pulsing. In the darkness below, a light appeared, not bright like the lighthouse beam. Dim, pale, like moonlight seen through skin. It came from a crack in the rock beneath him. The crack widened as he was pulled closer, and he realized it was not a crack. It was a mouth, the same petal-like folds, the same translucent teeth. Only this one was immense, carved into the seabed. The lighthouse above was just a tongue, a lure. This was the body. Elias tried to scream, but water filled him. His vision blurred. He felt the pull, inexorable, toward the mouth. And then, in the last moment before the teeth closed, he understood the letters. Someone needed him to come, so the story could be written down. Not to warn, to feed. The mouth opened wider, and inside it, Elias saw not darkness but rooms, corridors, stairwells, the interior of the lighthouse, impossibly vast, stretching down into the sea like a throat lined with stone. He saw faces pressed to glass. He saw hands. He saw eyes taken, light stolen. He saw himself, reflected in the wet membrane, his face already changing, smoothing, becoming something that could be worn. The teeth closed. Everything went white. Elias woke, coughing on wet stone. He was lying on the reef near the lighthouse base, half in a tide pool. The sky above was gray. The fog was thinner now, drifting away like a retreating breath. His lungs burned. He vomited seawater, shaking. His clothes clung to him, heavy and cold. He rolled onto his side and stared at the lighthouse. The boat was gone. No smoke, no wreckage, no Callum. Elias' mind struggled to piece time together. How long had he been unconscious? Minutes, hours, days. He tried to stand, but his legs trembled. He looked down at his hands. They were pruned, pale. Normal, he told himself. That happens in water. But his nails were cracked, torn, as if he had clawed at something hard. He found his recorder on the rock beside him, miraculously dry. He grabbed it with shaking fingers and pressed play. Static burst, then voices layered. Then, clear as day, his own voice. Not the voice of him speaking now, hoarse and broken. A smooth recording voice, calm. "I'm here about Warden's Reach," it said. "Someone sent me a letter." Elias stared at the recorder, heart pounding. The recording continued, but it was not what he remembered. The conversation in the pub was there, but altered. The woman's voice was different. The bearded man's words shifted. Whole sentences were missing, replaced by long stretches of whispering. Then came a new segment, something Elias did not recall recording. A voice spoke, intimate, close, like a narrator. "This is the part where he thinks he can leave," the voice said. Elias' blood ran cold. The voice was his, not his speaking voice, his writing voice, the voice he used when he narrated his own articles in his head, polished and controlled. "This is the part where he believes in distance," the voice continued. "But distance is only water, and water is only a door." Elias slammed stop. His breath came in ragged bursts. He looked up at the lighthouse again. The light was still on, sweeping slowly, and this time the beam paused on him. Held, Elias felt the familiar pressure behind his eyes, as if fingers pressed from inside his skull. He heard whispering, softer now, almost pleased. He tried to look away, but his head turned slightly on its own, drawn. He raised his hands to cover his eyes, but light seeped through his fingers, pale and steady. And then he felt it, a movement behind his eyes, like something shifting, a gentle tug. He screamed, clutching his face, but the sound was thin against the sea. Something wet slid down his cheeks. He pulled his hands away and saw, on his palms, not blood, but clear fluid like tears. His vision was blurring. He blinked hard, but the world did not sharpen. He touched his eyelids with trembling fingers. They felt smooth, too smooth, as if the lids were sealed. Panic surged. He pried them open with his fingertips, forcing the lids apart. For a moment he saw. Then he did not, because there was no darkness, no blindness in the normal sense. Instead, there was light, a pale internal light filling his skull. He saw from inside the beam. He saw the fog as a living thing. He saw the sea as muscle. He saw the harbor that was not a harbor, the pier that waited, the hands that climbed. And he felt, with horrible clarity, that he was not looking at these things. He was being used to look. He stumbled, screaming, crawling away from the lighthouse. But the rock was small, the sea all around, and the light held him like a leash. He tried to throw the recorder into the water, but his arm would not move. His fingers tightened around it instead, possessive. The whispering in his head shaped itself into words, gentle and patient. "You came to write," it said. "You came to look. Now you are the looking." Elias' mouth moved without his permission. His voice, smooth and calm, began to speak. It was speaking an introduction. It was speaking to an audience that was not there. "Hello and welcome back to the channel," Elias heard himself say, even as he fought to close his mouth. "If you are listening late at night," he tried to bite his tongue. His teeth clamped down hard. Pain flared, sharp and immediate. But the voice continued anyway, the words pushing through blood and breath. He realized then what the lighthouse did. It did not just drown you. It learned you. It took your memories and rearranged them into bait. It took your voice and made it a hook. It took your need to explain and turned it into a lure for others. Elias felt himself being guided back toward the hatch at the lighthouse base. His legs moved, shaky but obedient. His hands held the recorder like an offering. Inside, the air was warm and thick. The stairwell waited. The whispering grew louder, welcoming. Elias fought, digging his nails into the stone wall, trying to anchor himself. But his nails slipped, leaving scratches, long grooves. He saw, with a sick jolt of recognition, that those scratches matched the grooves he had seen earlier. He had been here before, or someone like him had. The walls were covered in desperation marks, written by men who realized too late that their bodies were only one part of what could be taken. Elias climbed. Each step felt like sinking deeper into sleep you could not wake from. He reached the keeper's room. The scratched warning on the wall glistened as if fresh. "Do not look into it. Beneath the light is a mouth. It learns you. It has your face now." Elias' hands lifted, as if to add more. His nails scratched stone, carving new words beneath the others. Words he did not want to write, but could not stop. "It will send you out. It will bring them in." He sobbed, but the sob came out as a soft laugh, wrong and bright. Upward, the trapdoor, The lantern room. The mouth. Elias forced his head to turn away as he emerged, but it did not matter. The light filled him from within now, not without. He heard the tapping on the glass. The hands pressed. The shapes in fog leaned close. The mouth in the center pulsed, and from within its light, Elias saw Callum, not alive, not dead, suspended like a face behind glass, lips moving. Callum's voice entered Elias' skull, ragged and broken. "I tried," it said. "I tried to burn it." Elias wanted to answer, to say he was sorry, to say he understood. But his mouth spoke different words, smooth and practiced, the words of a man narrating a story for strangers. And before we begin, Elias heard himself say, "Make sure you are subscribed." The mouth's light brightened, pleased. Elias felt his sense of self thin, stretched, like skin over bone. He felt the lighthouse take inventory. His childhood memories, his father's voice, his fear of fire, his habit of arranging rectangles, his tone, his packing, his ability to make people lean closer. All of it catalogued, all of it useful. Hours or days later, a fishing boat from Lark's Hollow went out at low tide because another letter had arrived. And someone, desperate or curious or guilty, decided to look. They found the rock slick and empty. They found the maintenance hatch open. They found the stairs wet. They found new writing on the wall, scratched deep enough to break nails. And in the lantern room, the light swept slow and steady, not meant for ships. Through the glass, pressed from the inside now, were hands. One of them held a small recorder, as if offering it to the sea. The villagers did not go in. They backed away. They left offerings at the cliff edge and told themselves the light would fade eventually. But lights do not fade when they are fed. Weeks later, another letter arrived in a city far from the coast, slipped under a door, dry as bone. Inside was a photograph, a lighthouse on a black reef, a beam of pale light cutting fog, and a note: "There is a light where no light should be. If you want a story, go to Warden's Reach. Bring your recorder. Bring extra batteries. Bring a knife if you still believe in knives. Do not look directly into the lantern room if you see it lit. Do not answer if you hear your name from the water. If you go, you will not come back as you were, but you will come back enough to write it down. I need someone to write it down." And now, as you listen, maybe you are thinking about the coast near you, about any lighthouse you have ever seen, about how comforting it felt, that slow sweep across the dark. Maybe you are thinking you will never go near a place like Warden's Reach. That is sensible, but you do not need to go. Stories travel, voices travel, light travels. If you can hear this, then a part of the lighthouse has already reached you, stretching through wires and air, looking for the shape of your attention. And if you are alone right now, if the room around you is quiet, you might notice something, a faint tapping, not on your window necessarily, maybe on the inside of your headphones, maybe in the back of your skull, soft as a fingernail against glass. Tap, tap, tap. Do not answer. Do not say your own name out loud to prove you are real, because the lighthouse does not need you to go to it. It only needs you to look. And once it has your gaze, once it has that small human habit of leaning closer, it can begin. It can learn your voice. It can learn the way you breathe when you are afraid. It can learn what you miss most. And then, one night, when you are drifting toward sleep, you might see a pale sweep of light behind your eyelids, as if a beam passes through fog. You might hear someone call your name from the water, even if you live nowhere near the sea. You might feel the urge to follow it, just to check, just to see. And if you do, if you let it see you back, you will understand too late what Tomlin Warden understood, what Callum Shaw understood, what Elias Mercer understood, that some lights are not meant to guide you home. Some lights are meant to find you. And now, as we come to the end, I want to thank you for listening. If you made it this far, you have done what the lighthouse loves most. You stayed. You listened. You looked in your own way into the dark. So here is your outro, the part where I tell you to like and subscribe and share, and come back again for the next story. But I will not tell you that, because if you come back, you will bring your attention again, and attention is the first offering. Instead, I will say this: when you turn off this video, when the screen goes dark, when the room returns to whatever silence it had before, do not be surprised if the darkness does not feel empty. Do not be surprised if you sense a slow turning somewhere far away, a patient rotation, a beam sweeping across fog. And if you ever find yourself near the coast, standing on a cliff with wind biting your face, and you see a lighthouse beam on the horizon that pauses, just a little too long, as if it has caught on something, do not wave. Do not call out. Do not let yourself feel relieved that someone is awake out there, because there are places where a light does not mean safety. Sometimes it means hunger. Sometimes it means the mouth has opened again, and it has learned a new voice. This one, good night.
Whispers of a love so true, painting dreams of me and you. And I'll hold you close in this moment so divine. Whispers of